This is Small Town Dark Truths, and I'm your host, Alexis. Now, this is the very first episode of the very first season, so you know what that means. It is the beginning of this podcast. It's the beginning of all the crime and horrors of these small little towns. And since this is the very first episode ever, I will go over how this podcast works. So every season is going to be based on a different small town, and every episode is going to be based on a different crime that happened in that small town. Now, this season, we're going to be going over Winder, Georgia. It's about an hour northeast of Atlanta, and it is actually where I grew up, so this season's going to be hitting home with me a little bit, but we'll go on and talk about that later when we go to our debrief after the season. So, yes, after every single season, there's going to be it's not going to be a break for you, or me, so you know what? It doesn't matter. In the middle of every single season, we're gonna have a debrief. So that's when I'm gonna be talking to y'all, and I'll have a guest every season, and we'll talk unscripted about the season. And this season, I will go over what it's like growing up in this small town. But anyway, let's get on with the crime for today. Winder, Georgia, a town where people still leave their doors unlocked, where you will go to the same grocery store and see the same cashier every week, and where a bonfire is not too far away. It's safe, predictable, and familiar, until two of the most beloved residents were murdered in their own home. Willard, also known as Ron Hess, was about 70 years old, and Dorothy was about 72. And they did live in Winder, Georgia. They were considered pillars in their community. They were kind and steady and not flashy, and definitely not the kind of people you would expect to make headlines for such tragedy. This case is disturbing and confusing, and honestly, I don't know how it hasn't been solved yet. So, yes, we are going to be talking about an unsolved case today, but I will say that it is still ongoing and it is not cold, so there is hope. But how do people like them end up murdered? Well, we are going to be digging into that today. This is again Small Town Dark Truths. This episode is called Car of Interest, and we are going to be going over the Hess murders. Let's start with the Hesses themselves. Ron and Dorothy were married for decades, and Dorothy was known as the heart of the community. She was always cooking and always giving, and if anyone was sick, she would be the first person to show up with homemade soup or homemade casserole. And Ron was steady. He was always tinkering in his yard, and if anything was broken, he would lend a helping hand. And one neighbor even said they had a way of making you feel like family even if they just met you. They were the grandparents that everyone wished they had, and the couple that everyone looked up to. So when they were found dead, this wasn't just a random crime. This felt personal to the whole entire community. It was Monday, May 20th of 2019, when the horror was revealed. Their grandson, who lived just across the street, went to check up on them because he hadn't heard from them, or anyone hasn't heard from them, the whole entire weekend. And when he walked in, he found both of them dead and instantly called 911. When deputies arrived, they immediately started treating this as a double homicide, and there was no signs of forced entry, so that means whoever did this either had access in, was trusted, tricked their way in, or knew how to get in. And this scene was processed carefully. There was no obvious signs of burglary or anything stolen. The autopsy later revealed that Ron and Dorothy were both shot only once, and the shots were lethal. There was no dramatic struggle or no fight in the house at all, and the home was not ransacked, possessions were undisturbed, and the absence of chaos suggests that this wasn't robbery. This was something more cold or something hidden. And when police tape went up, the house that was once normal and loving turned into a crime scene. When word spread, neighbors couldn't process it. People were outside crying and gossiping, and some were in shock and some were angry, which is understandable. And police started asking around, and one neighbor did notice something very disturbing. The last time anyone reported seeing Ron or Dorothy was late Thursday or early Friday. And on Friday, surveillance footage captured a car, a dark-colored sedan, possibly a Hyundai Sonata, making multiple trips into the neighborhood and also parking right in front of the Hess's home. And this car was observed more than once, and investigators believed it was tied to the crime. Sheriff Judd Smith later said that he was 100% sure that this car had something to do with the murders. And after the murders, the car completely vanished. No one has been able to find it or the driver, and it has not been in the neighborhood since, which is, I mean, I agree with Judd Smith there. It had something to do with the murders. I'm just gonna plant that out there now. And then we get the strangest detail of them all. In the days following their deaths, a shocking discovery was found. The Hess's identities had been stolen, and their personal information popped up on the dark web. That sudden identity theft raised troubling possibilities. It could mean that the murders ended up being connected to cybercrime, digital exploitation, and theft. And let that sink in. Someone didn't just kill them. Someone or someone involved stole their identities and sold them online, or possibly is using them. Now, investigators haven't left any stones unturned, but so far we have no suspects or no arrests made public, and we have more questions than answered. But here are the most important leads/clues that we do have. Now, lead 1, vehicle of interest. The dark sedan seen on video is a major lead because it was seen multiple times in multiple days before the murders on the property. And it is most likely the killer's car or possibly a surveillance vehicle, but no one has definitively traced that vehicle or the suspect yet. Lead 2, identity theft and dark web. The fact that the Hess's identities were stolen so quickly leads to digital motive. Maybe the murders were a part of a larger scheme, and maybe they were targeted due to the data that they held, their accounts, or access to something else. The connection to a national dark web/fraud sweep, Operation Disruptor, which was massive. We're talking drug dealers, we're talking counterfeit money, and we're talking personal identity theft, was even mentioned by federal authorities. Lead 3, insider access. No forced entry suggests that the killer was allowed in or the couple willingly let someone in, or personally what I think is the killer possibly knew how to get in because of the stalking of the dark sedan. But anyway, could it have been a neighbor, a service person, or someone that came often? I don't know. Lead 4, temporal clues. The timing is narrow between Friday and Monday, which is about 3 days, and the killer had time to execute, leave, and dispose of any evidence, and that window does matter. And now we're going to get into some theories that the police have gone public with, and being in a small town, there is a lot of theories and a lot of gossip, but we are only going to be going into the ones that the police have made public. Not any gossip, not any theories that were said in the town. Theory A crime of convenience gone wrong. Maybe someone came in thinking that the house was empty with the intent to burglarize or intimidate, but things sadly escalated. Of course, this doesn't necessarily explain the identity theft or the precision of the shooting because, like I said before, they both were only shot once and it was lethal shootings. And if you know anything about shooting, that is very hard to do, and it has to be someone who is very good at it to get that done. Now, theory B, a deliberate hit/digital fraud masked as murder. Maybe the couple was targeted because of their financial information and digital identity, and murder was part of the outcome or insurance for silence. The identity theft suggests that someone had motive beyond just violence. It gives the why to why this happened to such a lovely couple. And theory C, external actor using local tools. Now, of course, with small towns, everyone does not trust the outsiders, okay? You know who you see is a little bit different. You've never seen them before, and you're like, who is that? I don't know who that is. I don't trust them. That's just how it is. That's how it is in small towns, and it's going to be how it is in all these small towns that I talk about. Someone from outside the community, but using local knowledge. They may have cased the place, learned access patterns, which I think is true, and used the car to blend in. With all these leads, here's the frustrating part. The case still remains unsolved in full. And here's what's missing and the questions that would make this unsolved misery solved. Who drove that car, and what was its path after the murders? Where did the murder weapon come from, and was it disposed of cleanly? Because with it being a gun, usually it's pretty easy to figure out what kind of gun it is and who has it, but that hasn't really led anywhere, and I can't find any information on if that was ever dealt with properly. Sure it was, but again, I can't find anything publicly that they ever looked into the gun. Why them, and why this timing? Why would such a lovely couple who was loved all throughout the community been targeted for such a malicious act? Was there a link between the dark web fraud and this double homicide that investigators haven't publicly released yet? All I can find publicly is that investigators actually have said that there is nothing connected to them other than the same victims, which I think is just, I don't know. I mean, it was days after the murders that their identities got stolen, and there's no link there. I don't know. It's very suspicious, but again, all I can find about it is that days after the murders, that was found, but they don't think that they're connected. They think they're just two things that happened to the same victims. But, I don't know. I don't know. Did any neighbors or passerbyers hear or see anything? We do, of course, have the dark sedan, but did anyone hear the gunshots, or did anyone see anybody run out of the house or into the house, and they're just not saying anything? For people in Winder and Barrow County, the Hess were a rude awakening. It's a reminder that evil doesn't just live in big cities. It can creep around cul-de-sacs. It can creep around quiet routes and places you sleep at night. Neighbors have told media that they felt uneasy. One neighbor was quoted saying, "If this can happen to the Hesses, why not us?" And that is the ripple effect of unsolved murders. It doesn't just affect the two victims, it is a whole entire community that is now scared because there is a murder just roaming around out there, stealing identities, possibly, and just doing malicious things. That sense of security and being untouched in your own community was shaken. For the Hess family, especially their daughter and their grandchildren, the psychological burden is immense. Not only did they lose two beloved people, but the post-murder theft added humiliation to their grief. They'd live with daily reminders that their parents' death are unresolved, and someone is possibly out there using their identity. So where does that leave us? On a dark street in Winder, Georgia, two kind-hearted people were killed in their own home. No one arrested, no definitive motive released to the public, but what we do have is haunting. We have a vehicle captured on camera. We have stolen identities. We have a timeline full of ambiguity. And we have questions that are greater than the facts that we know. And those questions, those shadows, are why small town dark truths live. If you live in a small town or even a quiet neighborhood, this is a warning and a call. Look closer at what you assume and don't turn away from secrets in the dark. Now, if you ever come across a scrap of evidence, a photo, a memory about this case, please contact the Barrow County Sheriff's Department because, again, this case is still ongoing. It is not cold yet, so we still have hope. Anything counts. Any information counts. If you remember seeing someone that maybe drove a dark Hyundai Sonata that looked a little bit suspicious, let someone know. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Small Town Dark Truths. I'm your host, Alexis. Let's keep probing, let's keep questioning, because dark truths often hide where you least expect them. I will see you next week with our next episode. Bye! But wait. Don't go anywhere because I have a preview for the next episode. We are going to be staying in Winder, Georgia, but we are going to be talking about a mother of four who disappears in the summer of 2011, and her SUV is found in a library parking lot, but her body is discovered at the bottom of a well. We do know who did it. It was her husband, and we are also going to be going over his decade-long trial. Join me next week on The Well on Etheridge Road, murder of Tanya Lynn. I will see you then. Stay safe.